Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to another lecture of this course, Philosophy of Architecture. Today we shall have lecture number 7, and the title of today's lecture is Aesthetic Principles of Architecture Part 2. In today's lecture, we would cover Scottish School of Aesthetics, particularly sayings and interventions by the philosopher Henry Home Lord Kames, who spoke about utility and grandeur. And then we will also introduce building classification as per Scottish School of Aesthetics, and then we will talk about how buildings must have expression corresponding to its destination. In this lecture, we will also do something very interesting, where we will cover a conversation between a philosopher and an architect. We will reserve that for later, but that conversation is something that is very interesting, and I would like you to pay particular attention to that conversation. But first, let us see what is Scottish School of Aesthetics. Before we move further, you must take a closer look at this building which is present on your screen. Now, this building is Museum of Qatar, and this is not an old building. I mean, mind you, it looks like this is a building which is hundreds of years or thousands of years old, but not really. This is a new building, and it was designed by a famous architect about whom I will tell you later. So, the Scottish School of Aesthetics, and it emerges from the writings of Henry Home Lord Kames. He wrote a book called Elements of Criticism, and what he says is that ideas come in a train, and architecture particularly encourages ideas in a train, which means that if you are in a house and if you move from one room to another room, one passage to another passage, your ideas get developed and they move in a train. So, the kind of ideas you would have in a living room, and then when you move to say bedroom, you will have another set of ideas, and then you move to say kitchen, you will have another set of ideas. So, ideas come in a train, and it is the architecture of the house that facilitates or encourages those ideas to come in a train. So, Scottish School of Aesthetics talks about these ideas in a train, and then he says that there is a free play of imagination and understanding. This imagination and understanding together play a role in architecture and in aesthetics. This is also a reminder of what Immanuel Kant said as truly human qualities, which are imagination and understanding. But in aesthetics, in art, and in some sense in architecture, we do get a free play of imagination and understanding, and the way they come together to form an architectural object or a built structure. He also talks about gardening and architecture. So, what is the relationship between gardening and architecture? Now, gardening, you can see, creates the context. Gardening deals with flowers, it deals with plants, it deals with elements that are natural and elements that are live or living things, whereas architecture deals with elements which are brute, elements which are concrete and dead. So, the comparison between gardening and architecture, the main difference is that gardening deals with things that are live. So, roughly Scottish school of aesthetics is about these ideas, and then Henry Home Lord Keynes also gave 3 types of buildings, and he said that buildings are for use solely, which means that buildings that are only for use. I mean, we do not need to bother how they look, how they make you feel, and does the building really stand for something abstract. Like in the previous class we saw that the mill owners building stands for something that is a combination of public and private, masculine, feminine, symbolic and utilitarian. So, there is no such thing. A building can be simply for use, and we see ample examples around us where we can't really call a particular building a architectural marvel or architecturally designed building. Large number of examples, or most of the buildings that we see around us are largely for use solely. Then there are buildings, as per Henry Home Lord Keynes, for beauty solely. So, buildings which are purely for beauty, which are purely for pleasure, which are purely for contemplation, for aesthetic experience and so on. Now, there can be many examples under this. For example, say Taj Mahal or say Qutub Minar, or say, so there are several examples where you can say that these buildings are for beauty solely, but are they really for beauty solely is something that we have to think, we have to consider, we have to interrogate, because beauty can also be some kind of utility. So, these categories of understanding is something that we have to think about, inquire, but the classification given by Henry Home Lord Keynes is this. And then finally, third type, which is for both. So, both for use and for beauty. So, this is a fairly wide category, and a large number of buildings can be classified under this, that is building which is for use and which is for beauty. Now, what he said is that no matter what we write, it must be talked about, it must be discussed, it must be written on how to realize both beauty and utility in the same object. So, today we see a large number of construction happening all across the world, particularly in India. If you go to say cities like Gurgaon or Bangalore or any upcoming cities like Pune, Ahmedabad, you will see that a large number of construction projects are being taken up, both public projects and private projects, residential projects and commercial projects. Now, all these projects they try to combine beauty and utility. In fact, many of them sell saying that this person is the architect or that person is the architect and so on. So, how do they combine beauty and utility in the same object is something that architects have to wonder. I mean, I must give an example. Recently, I was in Calcutta and I came across an architectural object or a structure which was called Dockyard Co. And it was actually a monument. It was a monument which was for indentured labor. So, people who the indentured labor who travelled from India, particularly Calcutta, to all over the world, particularly Caribbean, Fiji, Mauritius and the countries where Indian diaspora has settled, and today they are known for Indian diaspora. So, this was actually a riverside jetty where there is a clock tower, there is a structure, an old building, and then there is a bridge and there is a monument which says that from this jetty, from this place, from 1830 to 1920, indentured labor travelled from India to all parts of the world. Now, the same building has been renovated and converted into a restaurant, and it is called Dockyard Co. and it is serving not only the beauty purpose because it has been renovated very well, but it is also serving utility because it has been converted into a restaurant. So, what I am trying to say is that what Henry Home Lord Kames said, and he offered a building classification of for use, for beauty and for both. This idea is something that is being tried upon today and utilized on a daily basis. I just gave you one example which I have encountered recently. Let us move forward. So, Scottish School of Aesthetics says that as all human beings are more or less of the same size, and this in this we find an echo of Vitruvius and Vitruvian Man, if you remember that painting which was created by Leonardo da Vinci, where a nude man has his outstretched hands and outstretched legs, where the length of hand from one tip to another is equal to the height of man. So, that proportion, with the navel of the man being the center of the circle and his fingertips are touching both the sides of a square and sides of a circle, which are superimposed upon each other. So, this showed man in its beautiful proportion, that man is a proportionate being and his structure is fairly elegant and symmetrical and so on. So, this is what Scottish School of Aesthetics or Henry Holmes Lord Kames says, that since all human beings are more or less of the same size, the components within a building also have a size or have a structure which is more or less same, or which can be in some sense standardized. So, steps of a staircase, for example. Now, if the height of a staircase or steps in a staircase is say 3 feet or 2 feet, then it becomes very difficult for an ordinary human being to climb those steps. So, that is why generally the steps in a staircase is of a certain size. Now, see, if a man was, generally man is about 6 feet height. Now, if a man was say 10 feet height, then it is, so if the range of man is from say 5 feet to 10 feet, then it becomes difficult to standardize, because you can have steps which are 6 inches, you can also have steps which are 20 inches high. But because all human beings are more or less the same size, the steps of a staircase can also be more or less similar. The same goes for doors and windows. So, for example, the doors do not need to be higher than 6 feet and they do not need to be wider than say 4 feet or 5 feet, because beyond that it is superfluous, it is not required because of the size of human being. Similarly, windows. Now, windows need to be of a certain height, it should end at a certain height, because even if a man stands, he will go as high as 6 feet. So, the window need not go beyond say 7 feet or 8 feet height, because beyond that it becomes superfluous and wastage. Similarly, if it starts from the floor, then again it is of no use, because no man will stoop so low that he has to see from a window which starts at the floor. So, it can start say after 2 feet or 3 feet and then it can go up to 7 to 8 feet. So, what I am trying to say is that a Scottish School of Aesthetics and Henry Home Lord Kames thought of these things, and he said that these sizes can be standardized, and therefore, architecture can attain a sense of proportion, a sense of standardized aesthetics across the world. He also said that consideration of utility combined with requirements of freedom. So, requirements of freedom means what? It means that of course, utility, because one has to move around and it should be useful, no matter what you create in a house, it should be useful. But not only that, he says that people need freedom, and freedom in the sense of movement, freedom in the sense of say looking out or looking in, freedom in the sense of doing things that anybody would like to do inside a house. So, what he said is that architects must consider both the utility of various structures and the requirements of freedom of people who are living in that house. So, this combination is something that both Henry Home Lord Keynes and the Scottish School of Aesthetics spoke about when it comes to architecture. And then he spoke about height of the ceiling. Ceiling, I mean, since all human beings are more or less of the same size, the ceiling need not be very high. So, if a human being is say about 6 feet, the ceiling need not be more than 9 feet, 8 feet, 9 feet or 10 feet. Beyond that, it becomes superfluous. But what he said, and if you see the point number 2, architecture strives for utility and grandeur. So, he gave these two factors, or he gave these two elements within architecture, or he gave these two objectives to architecture, saying that architecture can strive or does strive for utility and grandeur with a focus on grandeur. And he said that of all emotions raised by architecture, grandeur has the greatest influence on mind. What does it mean? It says that when you are in a house, in a building, different types of emotions will come to you. You will feel say depressed, you will feel excited, you will feel depth, you will feel say energetic, you will feel lazy and so on. So, different types of emotions can come to you, but architecture has a particular quality through which it can raise an emotion called grandeur. And grandeur means, it comes from the word grand, and grand means great, and great means something which is of gigantic proportion, something which is beyond human. So, as you can see that there is a repeated emphasis on the size of human being, and then there is an element of grandeur which is non-human or superhuman. So, he makes this point very, very clearly that of all emotions raised by architecture, grandeur has the greatest influence on mind. And then he also goes on to give the difference between what is beauty and what is grandeur. Beauty is not grandeur, grandeur is not beauty. These are two different emotions that Henry Home Lord Keynes talked about, and he said that architecture can actually raise grandeur as an emotion. And he gave this example, which is through height of the ceiling. So, in a house, if the height of the ceiling is about 9 feet, 8 feet or 9 feet, it is quite utilitarian and it is not at all grand. But the easiest way to make a building grand is to raise its ceiling height. So, if instead of 9 feet, if you make the height of ceiling as 20 feet, suddenly it becomes very grand. And why does it become grand? Because to look at the height, you have to raise your head and raise your eyesight to a level which is much higher than the human level. In fact, it will be as high as looking at the sky. So, looking up is not just a physical act, looking up is also a metaphorical act. And when you are looking up, what are you looking up at? What are you looking at? You might be looking at say someone who is taller than you, you might be looking at someone who is above you, you might be looking at those who are in the sky. And who lives in the sky? It is the gods who live in the sky. It is the sun and moon and planets who live in the sky. So, and these are all heavenly bodies of gigantic proportion. So, when you look up, it becomes a metaphorical act, and the feeling that gets generated in you is that of awe, that of grandness and that of grandeur. So, that is how Henry Home Keynes justified or spoke about that of all emotions raised by architecture, it is grandeur that has greatest influence on mind. Taking this idea forward, I wanted to show you this building, and this is a church in Spain, and it is called La Sagrada Familia by an architect called Antoni Gaudí. But before we go to this, Scottish School of Aesthetics and Henry Home Lord Kames, they said that every building ought to have an expression corresponding to its destination. So, if it is a church, and those who are going to a church or a temple or a religious place of worship, what kind of state of mind it would expect people to have, those who visit such places of worship. Or if you visit, say, a stadium, a sports structure, then it should make people feel energetic, make people feel excited to do physical acts. Similarly, if someone goes to a place of worship, he or she should feel solemn, he should feel the presence of God, and he should feel that grandness of God and his intentions, and so on and so forth. So, what Scottish School of Aesthetics says, that every building ought to have an expression corresponding to its destination. So, the building should look like, should express itself in such a way that the objective for which it is created, it creates, or it raises an emotion in the mind of the user, which is appropriate for the occasion. So, if you go to a temple, you should feel that emotion of love, of respect, of devotion to the God. If you go to a sports structure, you should feel accordingly. If you go to a, say, cultural place, you should feel as if your creative juices are about to flow, and so on and so forth. So, something similar is said here, that the expression of the building, the architecture of the building must encourage certain moods to serve the function. So, it is the same thing said in different words. Those moods must get generated so that the function of the building gets performed. So, coming back to this church, La Sagrada Familia by Antoni Gaudí. This church it's a very old church, already it is very old, and yet it is not complete. The construction of this church began in 1882. So, you can imagine, today we are in 2025. So, already more than 100 years are over, and yet it is still under construction, and it is said that it is likely to be completed in 2026, which is next year. But it is a very popular structure. It is a grand structure. So, you can see the picture of this church. It has 4 huge spires, so very tall spires, and it is a very ornate architectural marvel. You can see the kind of jali work which is there, the kind of entrance and the kind of spires. And you can see the size. You see at the entrance there are few people standing, and you see how tall they are and how tall this building or this church is. So, it is of a gigantic proportion, and no wonder, even though the church is incomplete, it is still being visited by millions of people every year. In fact, the last number counted was 3 million people who visit this church every year, and this is also considered to be a best known structure of Catalan modernism. Catalan is a province in Spain, so you can understand that this structure, this church happens to be in Spain. Antoni Gaudí, he is the architect of this church, this structure, and he started on this project, and he knew very well that he will not be able to finish this project because of its size, and he passed away in 1926 itself. However, his design continues to be popular and continues to enthrall millions of people across the world. Many people go to Spain to just look at this building and look at its architecture. So, the point that we started with is that every building ought to have an expression corresponding to its destination. So, what you want to evoke in people's mind, the emotion that you wish to evoke in people's mind, you must give expression or an appropriate expression to the architecture of that building, so that such emotions get generated. With this, I come to the conversation that I was referring to, and the conversation that happened between two great individuals. One is Jean Baudrillard. He is a renowned French philosopher. You can see his picture, it is on the screen, and then the another person who is an architect, and his name is Jean Nouvel. I have referred to this architect earlier in several lectures, and the picture that you see behind his picture, the picture of the building is actually Louvre in Abu Dhabi. I have referred to this earlier as well, that this museum Louvre, which the original one is in Paris, he was given the commission of creating Louvre Museum in Abu Dhabi, and this is the structure he created for Louvre in Abu Dhabi. Jean Nouvel is also an architect who is who won Pritzker Prize in his life, and Pritzker Prize, as I have said earlier, is equivalent to Nobel Prize in architecture. We have only one Indian architect who has won Pritzker Prize, and that is B.V. Doshi, Balkrishna V. Doshi, who recently passed away, who used to live in Ahmedabad. Now, here in this lecture, I would like to cover a text called The Singular Objects of Architecture by Jean Baudrillard and Jean Nouvel. Both of them happen to be French, and this conversation happened in French, but what we have access to is the English translation of this conversation. It is easily available, and you can Google the PDF form of the lecture. It is also a book by Verso, and you can easily buy this book on various platforms. So, the Singular Objects of Architecture actually has just 2 chapters, and those 2 chapters are nothing but first interview and second interview. So, these are nothing but 2 interviews or 2 conversations that these 2 people had on topics that interested both of them, particularly around architecture. So, this conversation documents encounter between 2 great minds of philosophy and architecture. Now, what it does, I mean, before going into the details, I will just give the contours of this conversation. And in this conversation, what they do is they challenge the aestheticization of thinking. So, you know, architectural forms of thinking or any artistic thinking or thinking about art, it is all about how to make it beautiful and how to make it more appealing and so on and so forth, and how symmetry and proportion and so on, it should be made attractive and so on. So, generally this is what the thinking is all about, and what they do in their conversation is they challenge this aestheticization of thinking, that it should not be done as a superficial activity, it should be real and rooted into something, into creation of something that is singular, that is unique, and we should not be doing a copy paste in even in the field of architecture. So, in this whole conversation, the resistance is doing a copy paste act in the field of art and in the field of architecture. They also try to tear away the mask of aesthetics, because you know aesthetics has become so templatized. So, everyone has created a template that this is the meaning. I mean, once they create a template, and then it is just everything is made to fall into that template. So, what they are trying to do is that they are trying to tear away that template of aesthetics, tear away the mask of aesthetics, because inside there may be something, but on top they put a mask, they put a decoration. So, in the beginning, if you remember, we said that is architecture nothing more than a decorated shed. So, this is what they are trying to do, is they are tearing away that decoration. They are tearing away that mask of decoration or mask of aesthetics and trying to uncover the real breathing life of building, of people, and so on. And what they are also saying is the culture. The culture itself is putting on a mask over this artificial world. So, what they are saying is everything about this world has become artificial. It is not really real. People are not feeling real emotions. People are not having real responses. It is all cultured. It is all determined. It is all told to you that this is how you should do, and then you will be acceptable. So, it is the culture which is putting on a mask on this world. So, they are trying to tear away this mask of culture, this mask of aesthetics, so that they can show the bare face of human civilization and human thinking about architecture. What they have also said is that the Disneyfication of the world. So, all of us are fond of Disney characters like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Minnie Mouse and so on. We all liked them as children, and there is a whole system of business behind it. So, and that is Disney World. You have Disney World everywhere, particularly in America. There is a great Disney World in Europe called Euro Disney, and across the world there are Disney Worlds. And more than Disney Worlds, you have Disney characters and Disney way of living life, where everything is created for entertainment. And so, what they are saying is that whole world is getting Disneyfied, and which is, say, infantilization. So, people even though they are grown up, they behave like children. So, this Disneyfication of the world and aesthetics is subservient to this Disneyfication. Aesthetic, the field of aesthetic is doing nothing but supporting more and more Disneyfication, and which means that everywhere aesthetics and the way of life is becoming similar to each other, and therefore, if everywhere in the world it is Disneyfication and we value all those things that Disney stands for, then how do we create something which is unique, something which is singular? So, what he is saying, or what they are saying in their conversation, is that because of this Disneyfication of the world, a debasing of aesthetics is happening, and because of that, death of any art that can hint singularity. So, any art, whether it is cinema, whether it is drama, whether it is poetry, painting and architecture. So, all of them are becoming templatized, all are becoming say imitations from something else. Now, only thing is, if you cannot discover what is the source of inspiration or what is the source from where it has been copied, it may seem like a unique product or a singular product, but what they are saying is, because of these forces in the world like Disneyfication and therefore the debasing of aesthetics, it has become almost impossible to create singular objects of art and singular objects of architecture. So, this is what they are saying that is happening in the world of architecture and in the world of art, and this conversation is indicating towards that. Now, they give an example of Pompidou Center in Paris, and I have given some pictures of Pompidou Center in Paris. You can look at this picture little carefully and then we can discuss. So, if you see this picture, you will see that it is not really a great architecture. I mean, it is just a simple structure of pipes and steel rods, and I mean, there is hardly any building here. It is all a simple assembly of rods and pipes and maybe staircases and things like that. So, it is no real structure. In fact, another thing that is that can be seen and noticed is that as if the inside has been exposed. the insides of a building. So, you see these ducts, the AC ducts and the AC vents, you can see them clearly. You can see various pipes which are of different color, blue, green, white and so on. So, of course, these pipes represent different things, that different types of wires, cables go through them, but they are all for people to see, and it is as if the inside, it is as if the skeleton of a building. So, it is not really a covering. So, like a human being has a skeleton, and that skeleton is covered with skin and so on. In this building, it looks like it is just the skeleton, and there is no skin that covers the skeleton. So, and the entire skeleton is up for seeing. So, it is a very strange kind of building that the architects created, and when it was created, this building was constructed, people all over France was scandalized, and they said, what is this nonsense, and it is not really beautiful, it is so gross, and it is so inside out, and it is as if you can see the entrails of human body, you can see the entrails of a building. So, the response was not really great, and the response was something similar to the way people reacted when Eiffel Tower in Paris was created. So, Eiffel Tower in Paris also, if you think about, it is nothing but a tower of steel and iron and steel, and there is no real architectural element in it, and it is very industrial, and it does not really stand for anything which is artistic and so on. So, the reaction to this Pompidou Center, Beaubourg in Paris was something similar, that it doesn't really, it is not really art. So, Jean Baudrillard in his conversation, he talks about this again and again, and he and I have given the statement, the quote by him on this Beaubourg or Pompidou Center, and I will read it out for you. What interests me is architecture as monster. Those objects that have been catapulted into the city from someplace else. We could provide a cultural description of Beaubourg. Consider Beaubourg as the synthesis of its total culturization, and in this case be completely opposed to it. Nonetheless, the Beaubourg object is a singular event in our history, a monster, and it is a monster because it demonstrates nothing. It is a monster in that sense, a kind of singularity. So, you know that both Jean Baudrillard and Jean Nouvel both are actually discussing the possibility of creating a singular object of architecture. That is the title of the book also, Singular Object of Architecture, which means architectural object, which means a building that cannot be created again, which is unique. Nothing has been done in the past, anything which is similar to that, and nothing that can be done in future. So, I mean, of course, we can't say it can be done in future, but definitely it has not been done in the past. So, what they say is that in this monstrosity, in this building which